Hello, hello, hello. We're going to get started. Hello, everyone. Hey, the music is lowering. Great, great. Thanks for coming. All right, this corner over here, we're working with y'all. Cool? Yes. My people's cool. All right. Hi. Hello, good evening. All right, good.
This is Seattle. People are a little quieter here.
Energy.
How's everybody doing? Good, good. This view is amazing, right? Yeah. Cool. Well, welcome. The first time we did an event in Seattle was 2 years ago, and we skipped a year, but we're back. I'm really excited to be back. It's my hometown, so excited to be here. Woo, yes.
A little nervous a little bit. We have friends and family that own it. So I have in-laws, I have friends-in-laws, if that's a thing. Um, so a little nervous, but cool.
My parents are back in the back there. This, I think,
Hey,
yes.
we'll put them on the spot to take the pressure off us. All right. All right. So I'm Wayne Sutton, co-founder and CTO of Change Catalyst.
I'm Melinda Epler, the founder and CEO of Change Catalyst.
If you didn't know, that's who we are. Yeah, cool. All right.
So we always start our events with a mutual agreement. As an inclusive event, we want to make sure this is a safe space for everyone. So please be fully present, give your full attention to the speakers. As underrepresented people, speakers often need that extra bit of presence from you to really show up and be their best selves. So this is a safe space. There's a code of conduct up in the front and also online. Take risks, ask questions, open yourself up to new ideas, build on each other's ideas, make this a real space of learning and growth here.
Make space for the quiet ones. If any of you know me, I'm an introvert, so often be in a corner. It's not you, it's me. Like my space. I do a fist bump. I don't, so I have my wall, my limits. But make space for the quiet ones. Take care of yourself. Coffee. Don't think we have coffee, but we have water. We have some other liquid soda if that's your thing. Restrooms in the back if needed. And these conversations often can be hard because it's emotional. The experience is just different here in America than other parts of the world. But try to have fun. Try to be open. Try to be, look at things with a light of learning and how it can be. We can create a society for everyone.
So as an inclusive event, we do several things behind the scenes to make sure that it is inclusive for everyone. Representation matters. We've received a lot of Gender Avenger awards over the years, really making sure that we have full representation of all underrepresented groups on stage. Restrooms, usually we have all gender restrooms. Here we do not. We have two gendered restrooms. If you are unsafe using those restrooms, let us know. Let somebody at registration know, and we'll figure it out. Okay. Also, if you need a mother's room or a prayer room, please let the folks at registration know, and we'll find that for you. We also have live cart captioning here. There's a live person on the other end, and perhaps that person might introduce themselves. Hey, Vanessa. Thank you. Also, we have vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free food here, and the code of conduct again, and there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes to really help make this an inclusive event. We also have an online toolkit for building inclusive events. So if you're interested, if you regularly do events, please go onto our website, changecatalyst.co/toolkits, and it's right there for you. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong button.
So Change Catalyst, we heard a little bit about who we are and what we do. We're a team of around 5, with also some volunteers and interns that's based in San Francisco. We build inclusive tech events through advising startup programs and events like Tech Inclusion. We've done this across the globe.
We take an ecosystem approach, so we really look at the whole tech industry, so from entrepreneurship and investing all the way through policy, as well as workplace inclusion, of course, and education is a big issue right now in education around diversity and inclusion, and particularly in the computer sciences and engineering, storytelling and media, and then the ecosystem builders as well, really helping to bring the ecosystems together, ecosystem builders together, and help focus on solutions together.
And when we mentioned being across the world, as you know, Melinda said earlier, Seattle is one of the places we've been at. Great city. Give yourselves a round of applause. This city, we've been to Nashville, Tennessee, Detroit, Chicago, Melbourne, Australia, London, done workshops in Puerto Rico, India, and Spain, and we don't go with a mindset, oh, we come from Silicon Valley, San Francisco, we're going to tell you how to do it, because as you all know, Silicon Valley and San Francisco has not been doing a lot of things right. So we go and we learn, well, how's the ecosystem growing there? Who are the thought leaders? Who are the ecosystem builders in that community? What can we learn from them, and what can they learn from us? And we try to take those resources, take the information we learn, and disperse it to you all. So we can, as humans, create a better tech ecosystem that's diverse, that's inclusive for everyone. So that's some of the work we're doing. And some of the things we learn by doing this work, issues are universal. What's happening in San Francisco, happening in Seattle, can happen in Nashville, Tennessee, in terms of gentrification, in terms of exclusion, in terms of entrepreneurship, leading underrepresented entrepreneurs out, lack of venture capital, the lack of inclusive culture is universal. Focus on solutions. Everybody talking about the problems, lack of diversity. Everybody by now should know that, okay, lack of diversity, 2%. Anyone want to give me what 2% stands for? Yeah. That's correct. But it's also like the number of like black people working in tech, in terms of technical roles, is like 2% across the board.
Yeah.
Right?
2%.
And then 2% women. So it's like 2% is a big number. We're talking about lack of diversity. Right? And so everybody on top of the problem, but what are the solutions to fix those problems? We need to design for inclusion with all, not just in terms of, okay, we need to hire, fix the pipeline problem, focus on STEM. We need to work on HR and culture, but also how does you build an inclusive product team? How do you build an inclusive product? A lot of people don't think about people with hidden visible disabilities or accessibility with building their products, but look at inclusion throughout your entire organization, not just in terms of people.
The other thing we've noticed is that companies really need to focus on systemic problems, and often they're not. Often there's a desire right now specifically to focus on unconscious bias training and have that be the answer, or an app, or some other kind of training. And it's really a combination of trainings and a lot of work on the processes and systems and the culture that have over many years been built with biases and discrimination within them. So it's really looking at the holistic approach of looking at all of the different ways that exclusion occurs within companies that really is going to change things. And then allyship. The other part is allyship, is underrepresented people can't do this alone, and underrepresented people need to be allies for each other as well. So it really takes all of us working together to create change. I believe that until we have a critical mass of allies, we won't be able to change. It's really taking all of us together to make a difference.
Above all, don't replicate Silicon Valley. That's kind of, and we always get like a laugh, we'll get like a cheer, get like, yeah, it's hard, be hard on Silicon Valley. In hindsight, Silicon Valley has this mindset like they have created products that everyone in the room uses. They have changed the world. There's some truth in that. But look at how we are now, especially in America. The world could be a better place if some things were done really different in Silicon Valley. I have a strong belief that if a lot of platforms, won't call any out, Twitter, Facebook, were built, with a diverse team, a lot of the systematic oppression that happens on those platforms, the abuse that happens on those platforms, wouldn't exist. The lack of accountability on those platforms wouldn't exist if those platforms were built with a diverse team. And so don't replicate Silicon Valley. Use the imagination, be creative, but the culture, the greed, don't replicate Silicon Valley.
So a successful tech ecosystem promotes diversity, it fosters inclusion, and improves equity for everyone. And we need to move through these slides a little bit quickly so we can get to the panel. But just really briefly, diversity, so we're all on the same page, is about bringing humans with different backgrounds to the table. Inclusion is not just bringing them to the table, it's also inviting them to speak and supporting and encouraging them to lead.
Equity, working to promote justice and fairness while addressing this historical privilege and oppression in society. And a lot of people were not talking about equity a couple of years ago, but equity is huge. Like, we really need to look at the problems and why people feel a certain way to help overcome those problems and create solutions for everyone today.
So all the underrepresented people in tech, women, people who are non-binary, racial and ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, veterans, people LGBTQIA, and then people over 35, and a lot of other people, returning parents, people who've been incarcerated. There's a lot of other people that are underrepresented as well, based on geography too.
We have a motto, we have a saying that Change College, focus on solutions. Like, that in itself, it should be like, you hear people complaining, even though I do rants on stuff. It's like, well, what is the solution? What is the solution? All right, let's take a minute. What is the solution? That's kind of a motto. So we're going to jump into some solutions in a few minutes. But first,
we just want to thank the team, the Zillow team, for having us here, this amazing space, and the AV team, as well as our Change Catalyst team. Renzo is here in the audience somewhere. Renzo, where are you? There you are. And then we have the rest of our team is back in San Francisco as well. Yes. All right. Let's bring up Lionel Lee to introduce you, to welcome you to this beautiful space at Zillow Group, and thank you for being our presenting sponsor.
Oh, I'm excited. I don't need a mic, right?
yeah, you get to go, Mike. You get to go, Mike.
I get to go. How y'all doing, Seattle? Okay, so 2 things about me. I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii, and we're really loud in Honolulu, Hawaii. The other thing is I'm half black, and my grandfather is a Baptist minister, so I grew up in the black church, and we're loud in black churches too. So I know y'all got the Seattle thing going on, but we're going to change a little bit today. Is that cool? All right. So how y'all doing? So we had 2 weeks to promote this event, like literally 2 weeks, right? Melinda and Wayne and I are sitting there talking, and we come up with this idea, and we say, hey, let's do this. And in 2 weeks, all y'all RSVP'd and showed up. Right? That's pretty amazing. Y'all should give yourselves a hand. I think that speaks really well to how important this issue is in Seattle. I am also in agreement. I lived in Silicon Valley. I don't want to be a second Silicon Valley. I think that we can do better. Right? So we're going to have a good conversation tonight. Please think about the questions that you want to ask. There is no such thing as a question that's not worthy to be asked, so please ask them. You have some amazing people coming up on this panel. I am honored on behalf of Zillow Group to be able to introduce the panelists or have them all come up and sit down. And then they'll introduce themselves. Is that cool? All right, cool. So again, my name is Lionel Lee. I am the head of diversity engagement for Zillow Group. It is my honor to present you with the panelists, and I will let them introduce themselves. We'll go through this for a little bit, and then we'll get started. Cool?
Oh. Busy with the mic there. Hello, I'm Rebecca Bastian. I also work here at Zillow Group. I'm the Vice President of Community and Culture here. And so my team, which Lionel is also on, we're really focused on equity and belonging in the workplace. We also, on top of that, build around cultural engagement, so the ways that we create for our employees to be engaging with each other and in our community. And on top of that, we also focus on how we can engage our employees to build on top of the products and platforms that they've built in order to address social issues around housing. So it's a really fun team. I also advise for some different startups, including Jessica's, which is really cool. She'll tell you about that. And have a book coming out in February, which I have to be plugging at this point. So, thanks.
Hi, everyone. I am Jessica Lachey Eggert. A little bit about me. My own professional purpose is to create tools in communities that provide equal access, that provide data for underrepresented and underestimated people to get ahead and have equal opportunity. So I most recently did that as the head of culture and innovation at The Riveter, which is a female-focused workspace and community based here in Seattle. And I now do that as first the founder and CEO of Leg Up. And so we connect working parents with out-of-home childcare and make it really easy for them to find care, which if you're a working parent, you don't even have to raise your hand. I just see you nodding. It's really hard. And it came across, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but in case you haven't noticed, we're 9 months pregnant over here with our second right now, and it's one of the big reasons why we started this. And then second, I do this as the creator of The Affinity, which is a private community for diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals.
I think we already introduced ourselves, so we want to just keep going.
I think that it's important that we recognize the work that you and Wayne have done. It is an honor, truly an honor, to call you friends as well as people that are true warriors in this space. So thank you guys again. All right. So we're going to have a dialogue, and hopefully, I'm not one of those people that like to stick to scripts really well, if you guys haven't figured that out yet. Like I said, if there's questions that we're not asking that you want answered, we're going to have a period at the time we're going to have a period of time at the end of this conversation where you can go ahead and ask those. Cool? Cool? All right, good. Let's get started. So we talk about equity a lot here at Zillow Group, and it's a pretty big thing for us. But when we do talk about equity as a company that is looking at equity and the hiring practices, some of the initiatives that they're doing, what are we really talking about? Anyone's free to answer.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, equity, like I mentioned, we talk about equity and belonging here at Zillow Group. And the equity piece is, it's for a few reasons. One is just, simply recognizing that everyone is starting from a different place. Everyone's had different opportunities, experienced different barriers or different systems of oppression. And when we recognize that, we can really provide everyone with what they need in order to be successful in their job and in the workplace. Also focusing on equity is something that when you really look at it, it's for everybody. And when we think about how we're going to move this work forward, we really believe that we need everyone to be involved with that, and recognizing that everyone has had different experiences, and doing what we need to do to support them really benefits everyone. And so it's a concept that we believe can get everyone on board.
Yeah, I really liked how when you're framing equity, Wayne and Melinda, earlier, and you mentioned justice in there, and I don't think that's something that we hear talked about a lot in organizations. And then I think about that. Have you all seen that image where there's inclusion, and there's a wall, and there's 3 people sitting there or standing there. There's one person who's tall enough to see over, one person who's like medium height, one person who's really short. So the inclusion was getting them all to the wall. Equity was giving them all a stand, so they had equal access. They could all see equally over the wall. But I really like the justice part that you included in the equity definition, because justice in that equity, in that work of equity, is just breaking down the wall. And excuse me, goodness. So I think that's really when we talk about equity, especially in the workplace, it's not just about giving everybody a stand or a leg up to have equal access. It's about creating systems and initiatives that break down those walls so we can all move forward together. I mean, it's hard work. It's really hard work, but it requires everybody, not just the underestimated, the underrepresented people showing up. It includes all white males, all white females. Everybody has to help break down those walls together.
I'm glad you brought that image up because this always bothered me. Yeah, because it's not about. Yes, there is definitely, we need to. There are some people in this world that do need a lift up and a leg off, but most of the people that who are underrepresented in tech, they didn't get the stool that other people got. That's the problem, right? Is that there are a lot of people in this world that have the stools, and other people never got them. So I like the idea of breaking the wall. Yeah, that's good. I think it just more concrete examples of equity in the workplace are pay equity. We have a real problem with pay equity when it comes to gender and race. And it's bad and is all based in bias. But then the other part is promotion equity that we don't do enough about. There was a company that we were working with that was looking at their pay equity, and they were like, oh, great, we're not so bad. We're pretty close to gender pay equity. And then they started looking at their promotion equity, and they realized that they had lots of women that had been working there for like 10 years and never got promoted. So that's great. They had pay equity with other people that had just started in that same tier. That's not equity. So it's really looking beyond and looking at deeper into those systems.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has said. And looking at other ways of seeing companies look at equity and use the word equity, now, unfortunately, it has got into the realm of buzzword. Like, we want to do diversity, inclusion, equity, right? We don't not just doing diversity, inclusion, equity. But then with that, it's like, okay, we want to correct and fix equity in the hiring process when trying to hire underrepresented people. Then it's like Melinda saying, the promotion and the salary, trying to create things, trying to fix equity in that. I see companies using that and saying that, trying to do it without making other people feel uncomfortable about the justice or the injustice that has been happening throughout the industry in tech, where people haven't got those promotions, people haven't got those jobs, and people were people who left the tech industry because the lack of equity. So that's kind of just where I'm seeing it now. So it's great that companies are saying equity. Like everything else, just need accountability with that.
Agreed. And I don't really think that I speak with a lot of folks, obviously, right? And a lot of times in our conversations, when we talk about equity, they really don't have a good understanding of exactly what that means. They don't understand the systemic issues that are involved. They don't understand the inequities that are involved. They don't understand, the things that we as underrepresented folks in tech have to go through to get to the same place that they're at. And when we talk about, when you hear a lot of us folks, underrepresented folks that are in tech, and we say we have to work harder than you to get to where you're at, some people are still in kind of denial of that. And it's difficult to convince them of that. Can you tell me, starting with Jess, can you tell me about an experience or, some eye-opening moment for you when you realized that this was an important issue?
Yeah. So most recently, like I told you all about Leg Up. So it's a childcare management company, and we created a platform to make it easier for working parents, to find childcare, out-of-home childcare. And it started as just a problem that I wanted to solve for myself. And then we started diving into the research, and then we surveyed over 400 working parents. And then we did some testing with just a simple platform, and then we went back and listened. And we realized that what we were creating wasn't just a nice to have, it was a complete need to have for working parents. We have over 43% of women who are leaving the workforce every year, or not every year, but 43% of women have left the workforce due to issues with childcare. Or because they wanted, there's a good percentage of them who left because they wanted to, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then there's a really, really large percentage of them who have left because they had to, because they couldn't find childcare, because they couldn't find something that was flexible enough for them to continue working, because not just because they couldn't find it, but because their companies didn't create an ecosystem or a culture where they would feel comfortable and they would be able to take care of their kids. And it's scary, and if you haven't experienced it, and you're going to be experiencing it you might experience it when you become a parent, right? And it's very possible that you won't have a space, you won't have a workplace that makes it flexible enough for you to have a child and continue working. It's very possible that you won't have any benefits. Only 15% of the private workforce actually has access to family leave. And so through that research and everything, we realized that we specifically focus on working parents, working moms too, really heavily. And I know there's a lot of people out there to support, but from an equity perspective, I think that's when we realized that there are things that I've dealt with, and there are things that a lot of other people are dealing with that are a lot worse. And I have a lot of privilege because I work in Seattle, and I've worked in really fantastic companies, and I've also been the head of HR, and I've been able to create policies that work for me and for other parents. But 85% of the private workforce actually doesn't have that.
Did you want to say anything, Melinda, on that?
I don't know when my aha moment was around equity. I think I've been doing this work for a very, very, very long time. But certainly, I don't. There isn't one aha moment. It's just for a lot of people. I think that it's just like little bits and pieces that you see over time. It's as you learn more, you go deeper, and you go deeper, and you go deeper, and you go deeper. And one of the things we haven't talked about around equity is, you brought it up earlier, is venture capital funding, and that monetary equity too, which I think there's a serious inequity around equity when it comes to investing in founders, and that makes a big difference in the kinds of innovation and growth that we see, economic growth that we see in our communities. It's a very large disparity in wealth generation and your ability to really thrive as an innovator.
Yep, I would agree. And Wayne said something a little bit earlier where he called equity a buzzword, right? And I would agree with that, honestly. And from my perspective, again, talking with people and having been in the industry for as long as I have, I've seen things kind of just go to the wayside because it was a buzzword, right? We didn't call it diversity at one time. It was called compliance, right? And is there a fear of that, Wayne? Is this something that's just going to pass, or what are we going to do? Is it going to be equity for good, or what are we doing?
No, it's going to pass. It's like everything's going to pass. It's like, I was thinking about your question you asked Jessica and Melinda, and it's like, wow, when my aha moment started for me, I had hair. Back in 2008, in North Carolina, it was, people did not, at that time, everyone was saying the tech industry was a meritocracy, right? And that's all you used to hear about merit. There's no problem with diversity. There's no problem. People are not getting funding. People are not getting jobs because they're not good enough.
Right.
And the internet is a level playing field.
Right.
And then, fortunately, we had data, and then we had sacrifices, and then people before me, before you, and other people made sacrifices, and that conversation changed to the lack of diversity in the workforce, right? Then we kind of left entrepreneurship aside until we have Project Diane and some other individuals talking about lack of diversity for Black women. That conversation arose. Then around entrepreneurship. And then it jumped to unconscious bias training. That was like 2 years strong, unconscious bias. And I'm like, we call that just racism. We call it what it is. It makes you feel better to say unconscious bias.
Amen.
But it's racism,
yep.
Right? So that has kind of we have conversations with new companies now around tech inclusion, diversity inclusion, and I can tell I'm talking with someone who just got out of school, and he's like, diversity inclusion is a big deal when you think about unconscious bias training. So long story short, yes, equity is a buzzword. It's going to pass. A couple years ago, it's belonging. All I heard, I want to bring my full self to work. No, you don't. It sounds good, but no, you don't.
No, you don't.
Right? I don't want to bring you can't handle my full self. You know what I mean? Anyway, so it's going to die around, and I don't know what's going to happen next, right? Last year and early this year, we need to talk a lot about harassment, right? And that should never die now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good point. I think because diversity and inclusion was a buzzword for many, many years, like starting 2012, 2013, everybody had to have, somebody who was focused on diversity and inclusion. But then, like, even when I was consulting in D&I work, I would get called and they would say, hey, we need some help with diversity and inclusion. And it's like, great, what part? Like, where do you need help? Everything? It sounds like it, because everything. And I think that, when you talk about the unconscious bias training and it being racism and sexism and, all the isms out there. Ableism, absolutely. It's we're giving words to things to make it easier and more digestible for people. Because you can't say racism in the workplace, right? Because everyone puts up those barriers. They get defensive immediately and like, I'm not racist. What are you talking about? I live in Seattle, the most liberal city or progressive city in the U.S., whatever. And if we actually gave everything the real words that it was, like when we show up, when we say something stupid and we say, well, that was like really racist, I don't think that we would get as far. So I think that at some point there's just going to be another word for it. Not to be negative. I mean, it sounds really negative, but it's hard work, right? And it's taking a long time, and it's going to take many, many, many more years. I mean, 55 years ago, I couldn't be married to my white husband over there. We're not far from a very, very different world. So I think, like, I don't know what it's going to be next, but it's going to be something. It's not going to be ableism. It's not going to be sexism. It's not going to be calling someone out and saying, you're being really racist right now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in a way it's a real positive thing to keep the language changing because it keeps people on their toes, right? Because, any language that we're using will eventually become a little bit cliche or a little bit, people start to gloss over when they hear it, and you want to keep people thinking, right? I think that the risk with that is that, each of these concepts or each of these terms that we've been mentioning here are kind of focusing on a different aspect of the problems we need to be solving. And we want to make sure that we don't just step away from that aspect when we move on to the next one. And, we were talking a little bit about when we're brainstorming for this panel, it's like, we've been shining a flashlight on one concept and going deep on that until everyone kind of glazes over, and then shining a flashlight on the next concept and moving around. And really, where we need to get to is just turning the lights on in the whole room and looking at all the pieces together because, we have some pretty hefty problems to solve here, and the only way to do so is really by approaching it from all those different angles.
Well, so you're in a great position, right? You have you have a lot to say in the way that a major tech company goes about its culture and goes about creating equitable spaces. And what kind of advice would you give to someone else that's trying to work on that too within their own company? How do they get the people that are a little bit more powerful than them to see the need for an equity lens?
Yeah, I mean, the shortest answer is like you actually have to invest in this work, right? Because I know that a lot of companies will try to get away with, a few scattered grassroots efforts, which can get you a little bit of the ways there, but it has to be an investment, and it has to have the support of leadership and the involvement and buy-in from employees. I think that a lot of the ideas actually need to come from just understanding the experiences of all the employees in the organization. And so, not coming in with this is how we do it and this is how we're going to solve it, but really understanding what the different issues are that need to be solved and the different ideas around that. but also having that, have it be funded, have it be systemically supported within the organization. There's not really the shortcuts without that.
So the other part of equity is also empowerment. And we talk about empowerment a lot in circles that I'm in. What is the definition of empowerment? What would empowerment look like in a tech ecosystem?
I actually really don't like the word empowerment, especially when people tell me that they're trying to empower me because I have plenty of power. I'm just not heard, right? Or I don't have a space to show up. I think empowerment is that like giving somebody power, but in another way. And there's two sides of the coin, right? Like I hate that word, but I also really dislike that word. But
It's a good word. You can use hate.
I know. I try to teach my children, like my child, no hate. Like we dislike things, really dislike things. Oh gosh, so empowerment. I also think it's giving people the power to have a voice in the workplace, because they might have plenty of power, but in a meeting they might not feel like they can show up and have a voice, or that they can be their true selves with boundaries, right? Like I agree with Wayne. Like no one wants to see your whole self. Often we're all very different. We all have way too much going on. There's too much. We're too busy to bring our whole selves to a space. But it's good to like show up and have those full self with boundaries. Yeah. So I mean that's especially in the workplace. Like it's just giving. It's knowing when to sit back and let somebody else talk, or let somebody else show up the way they want to.
Yeah, I think it's breaking down that wall, it's breaking down those barriers so people can step into their own power. And it's not about you doing anything except stepping back or supporting somebody else so that they can really thrive, so they can really be their full, powerful self.
So it's really about understanding the obstacles that someone faces, right? Removing those obstacles, but having a really deep understanding. And then sometimes it's really just about belief that these things exist, right? Because there's many people in power that when you tell them, this is the kind of shit that happens, they don't necessarily believe you, right?
Yeah. It's also, for underrepresented people, it's us knowing that we need to step into our power, knowing what our power is, and that we can step into that power, and to let all of the other stuff go that doesn't really matter.
What do you say when there's groups of us, let's just talk about specifically like young black men, right, who are told consistently in this country that we can't. And we're told that on a daily, like every single day, everything that you watch, everything that you hear, all the media tells us that we can't. And the crazy thing is that we believe it as black folks as much as white folks believe it. Right. So what do we say then? I mean, how do we get past it then?
Sad but great analogy. And to add to that analogy, Melinda, if you don't know, we married. We watch Netflix and chill. And I'm gonna get to the point. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm preluding with my analogy to add to Lionel's point about black men. We was watching several shows on Netflix and some series, and throughout the series and a couple of shows, I started noticing a trend. Black men was constantly being shot in the head in the shows, right? And I'm like, you see, one time it's like, damn, okay, wow. Then you see another time, like, why they had to kill him? Like, this person got killed and shot in the chest. For the black man, they had to shoot him in the head. It had to be violent. And over time, you see those images, it triggers, and then you take the police situation that has continued to happen in our country. All things affect us as humans, as black men. Society doesn't value us. And so what you said is key, because telling the word empowerment, I look at there's so many words, you have to look for the word with an asterisk, or either take this word and put it into a pie chart. Part of it, yes, you can delight. And this, my opinion, part of it you can dislike. Other part of it, you can look at like empowerment. Do you as an individual understand your power and self-worth and value that you have? Empowerment when you walk into this company, do you feel empowered to speak up and create change and be heard? Empowerment, does your peers, coworkers, and so forth empower you to be the best employee you have, can be productive, and then do you empower others? So that's one thing about empowerment, there's all these elements to it, right? And the key, I think, really starts with the individuals, is individual, how you see yourself. I've been in toxic environments where I'm like, I didn't feel like I was qualified to do jack, and I was like one of the first people kind of started some things in this movement. And I was like, well, I don't feel good. Like, what's happening, right?
Right.
It's like, no, because I don't feel empowered.
Right.
And once I realized that and got out of the situation, like, oh, I'm back to me. But we have to understand that as an individual.
Agreed. Anything on that? Okay. So want to talk about, so when we talk about people, or when we talk about people that are in positions of power, and yes, I believe that I'm a very powerful person, but I work in a company that there is a CEO, there's a CFO, there's a CTO. There are people that can open doors for me, right? There's people that have more privilege than I do, that can recognize some of the talents that I have, that can open doors for me. That sounds like allyship, right? So when we're talking about allyship, why is allyship so important? I mean, I'm going to address this to Melinda first. If you have not seen her TED Talk, you need to. So.
Why is allyship important? Really, all of the people up here that are working on diversity and inclusion are allies. And it can't be just us. It can't be just the underrepresented people fighting daily, struggling daily. It really does have to be all of us working together, because honestly, all of us created this to begin with. Some more than others. And so, I believe that companies can do as much as they can to create, and they're not doing enough to correct the systemic racism, sexism, ableism in our companies. But they can only go so far if we don't all change too. And it really needs to be all of us working together to make a difference, to really create change. And that's because our workplaces are human interactions. And so when there's a group of people in a room, all the processes and systems can help to frame that group and that culture, but it's really the people in that room that are going to change the way the conversation goes. If somebody's being interrupted, if somebody's being belittled, it's got to be somebody stepping up in that room to intervene, to create that change. It has to be us.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that base notion that it can't fall on people who are marginalized to do the work to change those systems. But also exploring the idea that it's not binary. It's not that everyone is either marginalized or has the ability to be an ally, but everyone holds different privileges and is subject to different systems working against them. And I think it's a really important exercise to explore, who can I be an ally to? What are the privileges that I hold that can make me a really strong ally for somebody else? And recognizing that we can hold both of those roles in different contexts and different situations.
I think about I haven't finished reading it, but there's this book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
I too have read part of it.
We're busy, right? Well, Blinkist it. And I really like that phrase, and I like that thinking, because it can apply to the world, and it can apply to us specifically. And in the book, it talks about applying to us specifically. We've gotten to this point in our career, but what we've done in the past isn't going to keep moving us forward, right? We have to figure out individually how to evolve. So we have to figure out how to increase our emotional intelligence and be able to have communication with people to get them to do what we want them to do, right? Or, get everybody to working together. We've got to learn how to collaborate. We have to increase our cultural intelligence so we can have a conversation with our manager or director who comes from a completely different background, right? And I think that this also applies to underrepresented, underestimated people. We have to, what got us here? Yes, yeah, sure, we had Obama as a president. That was great. And then we kind of got to this point in society where we're like, all right, we got a black president. We're good. We're like, America's at a good point. And we kind of coasted. And then we have a very different president with very different values now, because we kind of got complacent. We live in these bubbles. We kind of got complacent as a society, and we weren't moving the needle forward enough. We weren't changing ourselves enough. We weren't focusing on changing our cultures. We weren't focusing on helping other people learn how to get ahead enough. And so when we think about allyship, and like I'm just completely went on a tangent, but when we think about allyship here, we have to think about, what got us here won't get us there. What's going to get us to this point of, 100% equity, 100% inclusion? That's never going to happen, first off. But, getting closer and closer to that, we've got to start learning that, what we did last year isn't going to work this year. So we have to keep changing. We have to keep evolving. And really quick, I love that point that you made, that we're all allies up here, right? Because I know what it's like to be a black woman, black and Puerto Rican woman, but I don't know what it means to be LGBTQIA or identify as that. I don't know what it looks like to be to identify as Muslim. I definitely don't know what it means to identify as a black male, right? And so we are all allies, and we have to keep learning every single day on how to support other people.
I agree with everything that was said up here. I think the thing that I know that I benefited a lot from having allies in my life, because I was definitely one of those folks that did not really recognize my power initially. When we talk about empowerment, when we talk about people empowering you, when we talk about allies, are there times that you can think of in your lives when there was someone who came to empower you or showed you your power and what that felt like, and how do you carry that forward?
Oh, look in this direction. Okay. Yes, I think of two individuals. One was Steve Blank. Everybody should know who Steve Blank is. Well, not everybody, but if you're an entrepreneur, you should know who Steve Blank is. And he founded the wow.
Do you know who he is?
Yes, I know, right? What's the roadmap? What's the
Lean Canvas?
Yes, that the business model canvas. He restarted business model canvas, and so I had loved a program I had started and back in the day, and I wanted to go and create another program for underrepresented individuals, and wanted to start to raise a fund. And I, didn't know what I was doing, but I had a sense, and I also had imposter syndrome. I didn't believe that I was good enough, and I knew the world knew who Steve Blank was. I knew he was a billionaire. I knew he lived on a ranch and all this stuff. He spoke at Stanford, and I said, I felt like I needed his credibility. And we met at a couple of events, and he was like, if you come to my place, let's talk about your plan. And I went, pitched him my plan. He was like, you can use my name. I'll be your advisor, and let me know how I can do to help. I did not ask him for money. Hopefully that would have came later. But he was my ally. He was the person that kind of mentored and believed in me when I should have believed more in myself. That was like imposter syndrome and stuff. So Steve Blank, because I was able to put his name on my website and all that, and everybody was like, oh, we know Wayne. Oh, Steve Blank. Oh, how you working with Steve Blank? Because people want to know how I got access to him, right? So he was an ally. And another one was a black woman who I didn't know that for that long, who grew up in Alabama, who moved to Silicon Valley, experienced her own set of isms in tech, and I was going through a hard time emotionally. Because I've dealt with depression in my life, and she said something to me that I never forget. She said, Wayne, you got to remember, when Silicon Valley was being created and the government was funding all these silicon chips put in computers. What was black people experiencing? Civil rights. So we've been catching up kind of since then.
People forgot that that's when that started.
Yeah, and that what she said made me pause, because I felt like at that time I was hitting my head, I running the walls and barriers, and I needed that reminder and that sounding board. So she was a good ally.
Because we're so convinced that it's us, right? We're so convinced that we're just not working hard enough, right? We're so convinced that we can't do math, right? We're so convinced of all these things that are just bullshit, right? And then you work. I mean, for most of us that are sitting up here, we work on a daily basis to try and get people to understand that that's really not the case. What we're talking about is inequity, right? What we're talking about is the power of privilege. What we're talking about is the power of opportunity, because there's so many kids out there right now that are just amazingly bright, wonderful people that just need a chance, but a lot of them won't get it.
I want to add to that. I saw an article today. I sent you. I'm not sure if you saw it yet, but the article is about the first woman on a professional sports e-gaming basketball team, right? And this is 2019 going to 2020. It's a black woman who used to play basketball, hurt her leg. And why this is a big deal? Because that's a $1 billion industry that a lot of anybody in the e-games here. E-games, one, two, all right, got a couple people. E-game, $1 billion industry, whole new set of opportunities and stuff that like it's not on most people's radar.
There's a stadium for it in Las Vegas.
Exactly, right? And there's a startup in Detroit, young guy, he raised $46 million for e-gaming league, Dylan, which is basically the new NBA, e-gaming. First black woman, first woman, she's a young black woman, and she talks about all the sexism she had not because they saw her, but because they heard her voice in playing basketball. And it's like, oh, you're a woman. She's like, they're not even gonna pass her the ball on a game where they're trying to win. And they hear her voice. And that's the type of stuff we're dealing with today, right? So we got a lot of work.
Still dealing with it. Anybody else want to talk about, an ally that helped them to get to where you're at?
I had two, actually, and the first notable in my life was when I was in elementary school, and I got called a nigger on the bus for the first time. And I didn't really know how to handle it. I cried, of course, on the bus, and thought, why would somebody hate me? I'm literally just sitting here. And then I told my teacher, thankfully, my parents didn't know how to handle it. My dad was military. He was gone. Anyway, I spoke to a teacher about it, and she was the first person who told me that I would have to work a lot harder. She didn't say 2 times harder. It wasn't a scandal moment with Olivia Pope and her dad. But it definitely was a moment where my teacher told me that I would have to work a lot harder to get anywhere near as much as anybody else would in the world. But she also told me that all I can do is keep being who I was and keep being a good person and keep trying and working really hard. And then I could become anything, no matter what anybody else called me. So that was the first moment. And then most recently, one of my biggest allies was a white male here in Seattle named Fishkin. And he is, a founder of a really fantastic company, author of a, really popular book, and really well connected to all of the white males who are investors in Seattle. And I knew none of them. And I had really no idea what I was getting into in Leg Up. It was just something that I wanted to solve for myself, and I didn't realize how big it needed to be to support other people. And he made introductions, and before he even knew too much about it, he was just like, this is amazing. You absolutely have to know her. You need to sit down. It wasn't even will you sit down with her? You need to sit down with her. Let's schedule some time. And he did that and made introductions to me to over 30 people here in Seattle, and made me realize, and it made me feel at least that I belonged there. and that it was on them. It was their fault that they didn't know who I was. And I think that was probably one of the best allyship moments, allies in general that I've had.
So we're going to wrap up this portion, go to QA, but I have one last question for you. So when we talk about this work and we talk about what we're doing, what does success actually look like to you?
I mean, success is so far off that I don't even want to, kind of name that. I don't think we want to have a fixed goal that we're working towards, because this is work that is never ending. But I think what success looks like in terms of doing this work just in the now is really that we're all open to learning and growing and trying new things and recognizing that we haven't really nailed it yet, but also that we're all sharing what we're learning and what we're trying with each other. Because I think that there's a collaboration, a really big, deep collaboration that needs to be happening here. And it's not just, across a company or even across multiple companies, but it's, everybody that is thinking about this space and everybody that is open to being an ally or to, improving the state of whatever we're naming it at the moment, equity and belonging in our workplaces and in our societies, like that we're all banding together and really sharing what we're learning. And success is that kind of shared work that we're doing together now.
For me, it's really simple. It's when we're talking about the tech industry, that tech is built by and for the world's population.
That would be the big goal.
That's my goal. Is that's what needs to change. We need innovation that's built, that's created by the people in this room and people that look like the people in this room, and that the wealth gap is not increasing, but it's decreasing. It's decreased. It's flat, and all of that has to do with who's building the technology and who are they building it for.
There's a lot in what you said about the wealth. There's a lot in that, because do you all know the wealth gap in America? Most people know how bad it is. Black people what net value is 10K, Latinos 13K, white people around 100,000. That's the net value in America. So we can get to what Melinda said. It'd be awesome. I want to be up here. So I drew a blank when you asked that question at first. What success look like? But then what Rebecca said triggered, and what Melinda said triggered something else. But what my answer is that I believe my goal, my hope of what success connected to behavior change, which I learned a lot from Melinda, is that, and this is connected with what Jessica said about people want to solve diversity and inclusion, is that I would like to see success where each individual becomes self-aware around how they value themselves and other humans who are different than them. If they can change that perspective, be this person grew up in the South, this person is the LGBTQTI, this person went to the military, this person is Latinx, and it doesn't matter. I'm going to give them an opportunity, or they have the same value and access that I do. And that's what I think. If we can get to that as humans, the world will be a better place.
I love all of those, and I won't really define success anymore, but I think that something that I realized last year is I felt a lot of guilt, and when I think about the success of what diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, what success looks like there, it's almost overwhelming. And I would assume that all of you who are in this room who showed up care about it, are doing some work in it. And when we think about success, it just seems so far off. And we need to help so many people. And so for me, what I had to do to kind of step away from that overwhelming sense or overwhelming feeling of trying to get to success and trying to solve this problem for everybody is just recognizing that when I walk in a room or whoever I'm here to support, Like, I am sticking with it, and I'm helping them to the best of my abilities. I am learning everything that I can to be an ally for that person. And then it just keeps going day by day by day until, we get to this point where I can look back in 20 years and here's what success has looked like for me over, a certain amount of time. But I often encourage people to stop. Yes, there's definitely a big picture, but we can't, what is it? Eat an elephant bite size? I don't know, whatever, something like that. But it's just like one.
Cheese.
There it is. Cheese. There we go. It's just one step at a time, and making sure that you put your full self into it and you do as much work as possible, and you show up for somebody else every single day.
Well, thank you, guys. We're going to go to Q&A now. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. We have people walking around with microphones that will get them out to you.
Hello. Oh, yes, you can hear me. Hi, my name is Aaron, everybody. I have the question of what is a small action we can all take every day? Sorry, I'm sounding really TED Talky. I'll try to stop that. What is a small action we can take every day, whether it's in work or in our daily life with friends, out and about, whatever, to help promote these values of equity, empowerment, and or allyship? Thank you.
I think when we're talking about specifically the tech industry, I like to encourage people to just ask the question, who's not in the room right now? That's a very easy question to ask, preferably out loud, and kind of that gets the ball rolling of all of the different systemic changes that lead to why there are some people that are not in the room, but kind of keep asking.
I'd love to dive into some more context of your question. Like, is that like waking up? Is it walking down the street, coming in the elevator, office meeting? Like,
it can be.
It's the introvert in me. It's like,
no. It can be all of those things. It can be none of those things. It can just be, breakfast. It can just be hanging out. But I think that small actions are super helpful. And I think a lot of us in the room maybe aren't in HR, maybe aren't in the position of power. And I think small actions help. So if you have a specific situation in mind, cool.
Small action, I like it to start with self. So small action is like when you be mindful of how, again, like be mindful of how you could be treating someone different when you are in the proximity of someone who you're not necessarily interacting with daily or on a weekly or basis, right? And that means like, I catch myself, I get an elevator, a lot of white guys in the elevator, I might tension up. Why is that? Right? So it's like, what do I need to do differently? But also being aware, what could they be doing different? Start with self. And then if anything else, is just speaking up for people who voices are not being heard. Like, I try to give good credit where credit is due, right? If I heard something that I know that I heard it from Melinda, I may hear about it later if I don't credit her. I'm joking. But it's just give her credit. I know where I learned it from. I know where I got it from. It's like, just give that person credit. This person says this. You don't have to sound smart.
You have a question? Oh, there's one in the back, and then we'll go here.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
All right. So my name is Sophie, and I'm obviously white. I'm in tech. I not necessarily recently, but became aware of the fact that not everybody is a white woman, has a position of privilege in the workforce. And my question is, what can we do when it comes to allyship to be appropriate and to be supportive and to be able to continue to contribute to fostering an environment of diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging in a way that is respectful and is effective?
It's a huge question. And it's kind of tied to the last question too. I think the first thing that you can learn, to kind of Wayne's point of starting from within, is to learn The first thing you can do is to learn, is to continue to learn the language that people use to describe their identities, and learn what different people are going through that are not like you. Follow people on social media that you wouldn't normally follow. That has helped me a ton. Go to events that are outside of your comfort zone. Just learn. Read books, watch documentaries. There's a lot of ways that you can learn to develop your empathy and understanding of other people. So that would be number one. And the second is look for opportunities in everything you do in your workplace to make those more equitable, no matter what it is that you're doing. If you're a coder thinking about, who are all of the other people on your team? Are they able to participate in the same projects? Are they given the same projects, stretch projects for them to grow? If they're not, say something. If somebody is not able to speak up or is not speaking up in meetings, find out why. What's happening? How can you help them to show up and be their best self in that meeting? There's so many things that you can do. Just kind of look for different opportunities. That would be number two. And then number three is to just keep learning about diversity and inclusion and what steps you can take. There's a lot of courses now and other things you can do to develop more inclusive teams. So look for opportunities to learn and grow there.
I like that you came out and said, I'm a white woman. And I think one thing, and on top of all of Melinda's really great points, noticing that women are often lumped into one group, and there's often a lot of support for women in general, but there are all kinds of different women who are going through many different problems, Latinx women, Black women, differently abled women, different women with different religions. And so when you're in these rooms having conversations, when you're at a woman-led, women in leadership dinner, you're in a women ERG group having a meeting, recognize who's speaking up, recognize who you're not mentioning, and just really thinking about the different facets of women, right? Anybody who identifies as a woman, as a female. I don't think we do that enough as women, and I often find myself in rooms where, I'll be the only Black woman, and the issues that other women are talking about have nothing to do with me. And it can still leave people and women, even though you're doing these women ERGs or women meetings, you can still make a lot of people feel left out.
Hey, so my name is Paul Mata, and I am in tech. So there's a lot of firsts in my story, being first generation college graduate, and with that comes a lot of insecurities. It's also my first time being a professional in tech. And one of those insecurities is how do I, show my Blackness? How do I voice myself? And being at a tech startup where diversity, you can physically see it. You can see lack of diversity, and you can see some type of diversity that may be more openly represented than others. So I guess this is a two-part question. Since I'm at a startup, how can I go about getting that conversation to make diversity in tech an initiative, number one? And two, how do I place value in it where I feel like some facets of diversity are more valued than others, such as, not to compare one to another, but women in tech is very valuable, right? But having that conversation is, all right, well, is Black in tech valued the same way as women in tech, which can favor a lot of different people, but it may not value it from the racial diversity perspective. Get what I'm saying?
Get what you're saying. I like your shirt too. Yes. How big is the company? 10, 20, 50, 100?
So I started a month and a half ago, and in that time, it went from 270 to 300 and something. So even in then, there's
Hypergrowth.
Hypergrowth, yeah.
Awesome. Your opportunity, what you brought up, is not new. What it sounds like is at the company there's levels to it in terms of lack of understanding completely the diversity inclusion problem and opportunity. Sounds like there's a lack of accountability and a lack of a plan. And then with that, there's that understanding and awareness. And so, my bias is showing my assumption is you're a developer or designer.
I'm a technical person in a non-technical role, so I'm in sales.
Interesting. Awesome. Good position to be in, though. You manage the money. So that's a power position, actually, because on the consumer side. So think about the power you have in your role. But in that context, I think your opportunity lies is that you create a plan, but have to present that plan to get everybody on the same level playing field, so to speak. But it's also the problem is the things we brought up earlier is like, why does it have to be the unrepresented person to bring up the diversity conversation, right? Why you got to be you? But it's a situation that you're aware of, like, if not you, then who, right? So you have to decide what you want to do about it and how it's going to affect your role, and allow it not to impact the sales. That's the fear going to jump in when you bring it up as a black person in the company. Oh, you're going to impact the sales, the position you're in. So now you got to prove that you can do it and sales. So create a plan, create a strategy, get allies, and then bring it up as a group that, hey, we as a group of allies that's not all underrepresented want to present a plan and a strategy and a budget to make diversity a priority, and then set some small, like the other gentleman brought up, an individual brought up, around what are little things you can do to get to this end goal. And the end goal may be, oh, you want to just, where it's like 2 people, maybe 3 people. You may want to focus on this market, but don't make it just people focused. Make it culture focused for everyone connected to growth of the company.
I want to add one real quick thing to that. So I think part of that insecurity is when being very few, being black in this space, is that people watch what you do. And I have this fear of people watch what I do. And if I'm connecting to other people for the sake of, like, they look like me and whatnot, I fear of excluding others, when I think it's very valuable to me to have that, right? So for me, it's almost like, at what scale is it worth, like, me going out, reaching, connecting to people who look like me, and then saying that this is why we're banding together without, fear of disassociating from the greater number of people.
A couple of thoughts on it. One is that, for the size that you are, I think that making a case for diversity and equity and inclusion can really be bringing together a lot of different identities that are all underrepresented. And so then it's not necessarily just people that look like you, but you can kind of make a case for a larger DEI effort. I also think that, know your audience, and oftentimes when you're making the case for something like this, that just, relying on some pretty clear facts that you can cite and reference can be helpful, right? So one fact is that it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to do this work now than it is later, especially when you're in hypergrowth mode, right? These are all things that you can find articles and research on. 2 is that ultimately having a really diverse range of employees will lead to better business decisions and better outcomes. Like, that's been very well researched, and that's the kind of language that probably your audience is going to care about, even though most of us are doing it for bigger reasons than that as well. And 3 is that it can't just be a recruiting thing, right? Because you can't just be focused on bringing diverse employees in the door, but it has to be really a cultural movement where you're creating the space where people stay and tell their friends about it, and that propagates, but also where it's not just, a really diverse set of people sitting there afraid to speak up because they don't feel like the emotional safety to do so, but really where everyone feels like they can contribute because they have that sense of belonging. And so there's research there that you can tie it back to, so it's not just about you and your feelings, but it's really like, this is the right direction for the business.
And really quick, I'm hoping that you aren't the only with a company that size?
No, not at all. There's a few, but we're scattered.
Okay. I mean, you can't do this work on your own. It's really hard. Even just showing up, and if you're the only person in that room who looks like you, band together with other people. I think it's really important because you need to find, you need to find a sense of community of other people who get what you're going through. But then I like how you mentioned making sure you're not being too exclusive, because I think there is a lot of power in exclusive groups, but then there are a lot of people who are going to get butthurt that they're being left out. And so one thing that I've always pushed people to do is to create a diversity and inclusion council of other people who care about this work. And it's a really great way to show up as a leader in this space as well. And not saying that you have to move into, DEI work specifically, but creating a council informally and then letting that groundswell happen. Because even if you don't have leadership buy-in, there's a lot of power in groups of people coming together and making noise, respectfully, of course, right? So don't do it alone, but then see and find some way to bring other people into the group and get other people talking about it. Plus, you can hand it off to somebody else later down the road, right? Because you don't need to be doing all that work.
Also, congrats on your first. Those are awesome.
Thank you.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
So I have a little bit more of a nitty-gritty question, but given the, different backgrounds here and the consulting work that I've heard mentioned, I feel like this is the appropriate space. So working in tech, you can typically take data to engineers and say, this is the data, this is what we should do. But when you're talking about D&I initiatives, it's very difficult to get accurate data because that requires self-identification. For a lot of reasons, that's very sensitive. How have you addressed those issues either in your own companies or in companies that you've consulted for?
Just ask the data. I mean, you should frame it as this is why we're asking your data. This is why we're asking in order to improve our diversity and inclusion efforts. We want to know what our current population is so that we can better understand and make some goals around it. And you can. Sorry?
You should get a mic.
He said there's laws that prevent you from accessing that information if you're not in HR.
Yeah, that information is protected in a lot of states, and I think countrywide. You can't just request it as an individual contributor at a corporation.
Well, there's 2 levels of data, right? There's equal employment opportunity data, and that is collected from all employees, and it's limited, right? So it covers ethnicity, veteran status, gender. I think that's it.
It is only public companies. Not all companies do that.
Right.
Yeah.
What we do specifically at Zillow Group here is we do an anonymous equity and belonging survey once a year where we ask people really granular self-identifying information, but it's not tied to who they are. And then we look at that at the aggregate level to understand really the breakdown of our employee base. And we also ask experience questions around sense of belonging, sense of engagement, support from managers, all the different kind of experiences. And so we're able to really look at that across a lot of different dimensions. We also ask an employee survey that is not anonymous, but is only available within HR and within kind of upper management that ties the EEO data to even more in-depth employee engagement questions as well.
Yeah, just to finish my thought is I mean, if you, assuming you're in an HR role or in a position where you can influence HR, then you should develop a survey and ask those questions. And you don't be afraid of it.
You don't have to fully develop it yourself, too. You can go to Culture Amp. They have an inclusion survey that's free, and they do a fantastic job of keeping data anonymous. You can actually only see down to specific levels of information and detail if there's a group of 5 people. So if you only have 3 women in the organization, you can't actually dive in and see what each of their answers are. There has to be at least 5, or you can set a parameter if they have 5 or more answers of people in that specific group. But yeah, they do a really great job of asking really inclusive questions. It took about over a year, I think, to create. I asked them because I learned about it at Tech Inclusion number 2.
We were part of the first roundtable where they were starting to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's free. So.
I heard a little, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard a different question, is that you want data to help create change inside your organization because people don't believe what you're saying because they don't have the data. Is both? Yeah. Have the data. Yeah. Facts. That's all 100% true. My underlying emotion and feelings around that is usually what I've seen working with companies is that when you have to present so much data to create some kind of behavior or diversity inclusion change, you got humans who don't believe that diversity inclusion matters, and that is the core problem an individual need to call out and address because you're going to hit a roadblock regardless how much data they're not going to change. I'm sorry. I made a point.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Moderator.
So we have time for one more question, I believe. Yes. Can somebody get a microphone over to her?
Can we keep the mic with the person who's asking the question just because CART can't pick up what you're saying if you don't have the mic.
Right.
So just keep it with you while we're...
And this will be the last question because we have to keep it going. We have to keep it moving.
Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte. I work for Indeed. My question is in regards to kind of like public policy and institutional discrimination. In my personal experience, one of the biggest things that's been impacting my productivity as well as mental health has been things that have been trying to strip away rights for LGBTQ employees right in regards to housing, employment, or healthcare. There's Supreme Court cases right now asking whether it's okay to fire someone if they're gay or trans, and several other moves by the administration that can really affect someone's life deeply. So the crux of my question is, how can we get our companies to engage at that level if they're hesitant to get involved, quote unquote, politically with any kind of thing that's going on like that?
Great question.
Well, so we have a Pride network that is really pretty large and effective. We have 9 affinity networks here, which about 40% of the company are involved with. So our Pride network is really big, and they've definitely done some really amazing work in advocating for internal policies and just awareness and awareness around the support needed for our LGBTQIA employees. And we have exec sponsors that are tied to each of our networks, so they've been able to really escalate a lot of the ideas and concerns through their exec sponsor to the larger exec team and also through our team. And then, it's a combination of things. There's really, I think it's always super important for companies internally to acknowledge what's going on in the world that might be impacting their employees' lives, and just even as a company, but also as a manager with your reports, just acknowledging like this must be something that's really weighing on you, and recognizing that it's not something you can just leave behind when you come to work, and creating that space for that experience. Within this space, there's a few different public acts that a lot of companies have signed on to. What are the acts that we've signed on to recently? the different acts and signatories that we've signed on to around. There's the Equality Act, and there's.
I know websites, so I know like Oracle. I don't know all the other companies that might be here. Businesses for Trans Equality is like a website that someone put up, and that has a basic statement of support for transgender people, and they're right.
Yeah. So basically, there's a few different like larger movements that might feel safer for a company to participate in because there's a lot of other companies doing so as well, and that both help in terms of lending a voice, but also show that solidarity. Other ideas?
I think we have to wrap this up, but because we have to move on. But one of the things that I do want to say is that it's extremely important within your company that you have engagement and you have buy-in from the top down. When people ask me what's the biggest thing that we did at Zillow Group to turn our stuff around and to really get on track with this, is that we made it very clear to our entire employee base that this was not just lip service, that this was very, very serious for everyone involved, from statements from our CEO to our choices in who's going to lead the organization and where they come from. Everything that we do is data-driven. Everything that we do is data-driven. And you have to be very creative about how you find that data. Yes, because there are some legal roadblocks to getting some of that data, but it is doable. You just have to be creative. You have to be smart. You have to be willing to do that. And now we have to stop so we can move on because we went way over time, and I'm going to get in trouble. And yes, Wayne?
I'll be real brief. It's because it's a very important question. It's a really very important question. Thank you for asking the question. In terms of, like, your question is similar to the gentleman's question here, and another individual question here around data, and then also what you do to create change. Unfortunately and fortunately, when you look at from the question you asked around those Supreme Court and political actions that's happening that impact your productivity and emotionally, connect to those causes, then it has to connect to the HR, the comms, and legal side of the organization. What can the organization do, and what can you do internally? So as one aspect is like, okay, then is the company doing nothing? Then you do what we advise this gentleman. You get your group, your team, and your allies, and go to what can we do legally from a company perspective, making sure you feel value, and what can the company do publicly, right? And then from there, it's like, okay, then you go rogue and just say, you know what, I feel strongly about this, you're gonna do it. Because when the Muslim ban happened at the airports, that's when you saw CEOs of major tech companies in Silicon Valley go to the airports because they have family and friends, and employees did strikes and protests at the airports. There's a lot of other shit that happened before the Muslim bans happened at the airport, and nobody did anything, right? So then you have to decide what you're going to do as an individual, and also call out the companies when other stuff has happened that you care about that's not being addressed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, we're done. I want to thank the panelists. It's been an honor, truly an honor, and we are going to move on. Thank you guys very much.
All right. I might adapt this a little bit because we went significantly over. So I'm just gonna go through it, but you all in for a little bit of allyship still? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So a few years ago, I found myself at my dream job. I moved from Seattle, where I'm from, to San Francisco, became an executive at an engineering firm, became the head of marketing and culture, and I also worked with some of the nation's largest healthcare systems on behavior change strategies for sustainability and for energy, water, waste, and using technology and storytelling and behavior change strategies to really affect change. It was my dream job in a lot of ways, where I really found myself doing all the things that all the experiences that I've acquired over the years, put into practice. And at the same time, it was the worst professional experience of my life. There were bigger issues, but most of what happened were little behaviors and patterns that slowly affected my ability to show up and do my work well. They ate away at my confidence, my leadership, and my capacity to innovate. So at a real low point, I realized that I was in a state of depression. Exclusion can break you. It can break you down over time. The former White House CTO, Megan Smith, calls this death by 1,000 paper cuts. Every day, over and over and again, you're just paper cuts. From harassment to bullying to microaggressions, those little everyday behaviors that, whether intentional or not, the negative behaviors that are from the people around you slowly eat away at your ability to do your work. tokenism, that feeling that I am the only in the room, and that I have the baggage of being the only person in the room, which is a weight that systemic biases, process biases, and discrimination. And what happens is it actually affects your amygdala. So, for example, my first presentation at the company, I was hired to help take the company through a couple of mergers and acquisitions, to help change the culture of the company, and also to help shepherd them through a new brand transition. And so I walk up to the front of the room to give a presentation on the strategies that they asked me to create, that they hired me to create. And before I even started speaking, people started looking down and not paying attention. Before I even started speaking. As soon as I started to speak, people started interrupting me over and over and over again. Some of my ideas that I pitched, that I talked about in my presentation, they were totally dismissed. And then somebody else, a few minutes later, would bring them up, and they were championed. I was the only woman in the room of a sea of 19 different executives in that room. And I could have used an ally. And what that did, when I was in front of that room, when I started to see that they weren't paying attention, I started to not showing up as well. Because that fight or flight is telling me either get out of there right now or fight my way through it. And personally, I am the one that wants to fly. And so all I'm thinking about, my whole body, my whole brain, is thinking about flying out of that room. And so it can change you. That's where imposter syndrome comes in, that feeling that I'm not worthy, that I don't have all that experience that I had all over the years. It doesn't matter. The stereotype threat, the feeling that I am going to just step into all the stereotypes around my gender or race or ethnicity, covering, code switching, being somebody different at work than you are at home, failing up, that suddenly I'm an executive and I'm failing here because I'm not adequate for some reason, or lack of productivity, where you start to slowly shut down. Numbness and distancing, where you shut down even more, where you're just kind of just getting by in your work. Or worse, I'm sure some of you have seen it, that executives, that they cope by harassing other people, by bullying other people. So it affects you and it changes you fundamentally. Before I get to that, so I realized in that moment, I started doing some research and realized that I wasn't alone, that this is something that happens in the workplace. It took me a while to figure that out. I was dark in a dark place for a while, and realized, I started looking at microaggressions and toxic workplace cultures, and started to realize that I, as an executive, I could do something. Even though I was suffering through harassment, I was suffering through microaggressions daily, there were things that I could do to make a difference. First, I started by looking at the data internally, and I presented it to the executives, and not to scare you, but I presented it to them, and they didn't want to hear it. And so, in fact, my colleague, the CFO, actually told me, after only talking about it twice in 2 separate meetings over 2 weeks, that you got to stop with this woman thing, right? But there are other things that you can do. There are other ways that you can create change. So I couldn't talk about diversity and inclusion. I couldn't talk about women. I couldn't talk about the underrepresented minorities that were leaving the company. So I put in place an emotional intelligence program for executives. They started to think about how they could be better executives, better humans, right? We created a wellness program that included mindfulness, that also included we gave everybody jawbones, and actually the women in particular in the company started to feel better because they came together around the wellness program. So there are other things that you can do outside of diversity programs. If you're really in that horrible place of people not caring at all, there are other things that you can do that make a difference. So I put a bunch of strategies into place, started to create change, hired some people to continue that change, and then I left to create Change Catalyst and really address change in the tech industry as a whole. And then I started to realize in doing this work, so we're celebrating our 5th anniversary of tech inclusion this year. Yeah. Thank you. And I started to realize doing this work that it really is going to take all of us, that I fundamentally believe, I said this earlier, I'm going to say it again, that we need a critical mass of allies before things will fundamentally shift. And so I did a TED Talk on allyship. It's 10 minutes long. It does answer some of the questions that were asked earlier about different little things that you can do to create change as an ally. So please check it out, spread the word, and share it with your colleagues that might need it. I know the Zillow group actually has done some of the work with this TED Talk, which is awesome. I'm going to skip some of this. So, excuse me. So allyship is understanding the imbalance in opportunity and using your privilege to create change. We all have different levels of privilege. Everybody in this room has some privilege. We are, in the United States, we are more privileged than other people who are not in the United States, for example. So everybody has privilege. You're always more privileged than somebody else. So use your privilege to change. We all can do this together. I'm going to just really quickly touch on this. Start by doing no harm. That's a big one. That's where a lot of microaggressions come from, is people not knowing that they're doing something wrong. So learn the language that people use to describe their identities, the pronouns, how I pronounce my name, how I describe my identity, my religion, my ethnicity. These are important to people. And if you don't know, just ask. Don't interrupt. Echo and attribute. So as I said, a lot of my ideas were quickly taken by somebody else and championed. So as an ally, you can say, hey, that was a great idea. Melinda's idea was awesome. Let's figure out how to do it. And then we both win. Learn the language, listen and learn. So both of those things are key. I'm still continuously learning to be an ally. A lot of allyship is just listening and then taking that in and then eventually taking action, right? So first do no harm, then advocate for underrepresented people. And underrepresented people can advocate for other underrepresented people too. A white woman can advocate for a black man, for example. Start by intervening. When you see something, do something. If you see somebody's being interrupted, if you see that somebody is being bullied or harassed, figure out how to intervene in that situation. Invite people to speak, underrepresented people to speak. Refer them for jobs, encourage them. That empowerment conversation that we had earlier, think about how you can make the space for somebody to step into their power. And then change somebody's life significantly. That might be in education, like helping the next wave of engineers, hiring people, really thinking about who you're hiring on your team and creating changes around the hiring structures in place currently. Promotion, really thinking about how people are promoted, who's being promoted, and creating change there. Leadership, the glass ceiling, the ceiling I hit. How can you create pathways for people to become leaders? How can you make a difference there? And of course, above all, focus on solutions. So there's always a solution to the problem in front of you. Take a step back sometimes, think about it, look at it from different angles, and focus on that solution. So we're going to do a little exercise. Renzo, are you around? Can I have a couple of other people help? While they're passing this around, I want to have each person partner with one person that they don't know, and share what is one thing that an ally has done for you. And we want to do active listening. So when that person is talking, let them talk. Let them be them. Let them step into their power in that moment. That's going to be hard for some people not to interrupt in that moment. Just 2 minutes. Share one thing that an ally has done for you, and then you can switch. So I'll put a timer on. Go ahead and match up. All right. Um, Renzo, we don't have. Do you need somebody to talk to? Okay, come here. All right. There's people over here. Can I ask one of you to move? Okay. Yeah. Just maybe. All right. Go ahead and switch to the other person. Okay, go ahead and wrap up your conversations. Come on back. All right, everybody. Hey. I'm going to give you another opportunity to talk, so just give me a second and I'll tell you what to talk about. Okay. All right, can everybody hear me? Okay. Okay, so the second part of this exercise is to take a moment. You can take a moment and think about this first for the introverts, but share, is there one opportunity in your life to be a better ally for somebody else? And then what commitment will you make to be a better ally for someone else or a group of people? So actually, for the introverts in the room, I'll let you sit with that for just a few seconds before you talk, okay? I know I need time to think. Okay. So before you write it down, you can talk to each other about it, and then we'll write it down afterwards. So take 2 minutes and do the same thing, 2 minutes each. Go ahead. Write something down. I'm going to have them pass it. So did you have a helper?
He's gone now.
All right, go ahead and switch to the other person. And we're gonna collect all the stickies and probably put them on the wall.
Oh yeah, he told me about it.
Yeah,
so I'll
we
get
can
a bunch of different views. Right.
Okay. Bring your conversations to a close. And then go ahead and write down what your commitment is. So yeah, on a sticky note, write down what is your commitment. What are you going to do as an ally going out of this room? What commitment are you going to make? And if you want to write down two, you're going to pass one of them. If you want to write down the other one to keep, or you can take a photo of it too, so you know what you wrote. And whenever you're done, just pass their sticky note to the end so Renzo could collect it. And then we're going to put it all on the wall during happy hour so everybody can kind of see. He's at that end. While they're being collected and people are still finishing up, would somebody like to share what their commitment is? Yeah.
Hi, my name is God Given, and I'm actually a student at UW. And as an informatics major, I am part of the Informatics Undergraduate Association's Director of Diversity. And I have not been as good as Ava here. She is another student who is also Director of Diversity. She is so, I guess, empowered in her own, and I want to be just like her, but I feel like I let her down all the time. So I want to be a better ally for her so that I can support her in her millions of events. So she's actually hosting a tech symposium in UW to include other people that might not have the opportunity to see what people like me and other person of color, all this stuff, can do in technology. So I want to be better for her.
Cool. Who else? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kaylin. As an extrovert, I definitely want to be a better ally for some of the more introverted, quiet folks on our team. One thing that I really want to help fight is the notion that extroverts are the only people who can make good leaders. Some of the folks in my office that I think would be great leaders happen to be on a bit of the more quiet side, so trying to figure out how to listen more, pass them the mic, and give them the opportunity, and fight the bias that introverts can't be team leads or managers to the best of my ability.
This one is probably more of like a long-term commitment, but it's to, I think I said, grow into the privileges that I do have and use them to be an ally. Because, for the entire time that I've been in college, I really was focused on, oh wow, because I was really learning about how underrepresented I was and the privileges I didn't have. Like, I didn't even know this in high school. Even in high school, I thought Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and they were in the same time frame and whatnot. So, like, it was really learning more about like my entire history, and now that I'm in the work world or I'm interning, it's seeing the privileges that I do have and using my voice when I can and growing into that position.
So in my startup, we serve people who are medically challenged and disabled. And my commitment, it's a really hard thing to do. Entrepreneur life is very tough. And every now and then there's an opportunity to be like, do the sexy thing, to go after people who maybe would look better in pictures and have more sexy pictures and look awesome on Facebook or whatever. And my commitment after it's keep going, keep focused. We have an amazing niche market that we can serve. And as we grow, to hire those people so that they represent our customers and who we're selling to.
Cool. If you have a sticky that hasn't been collected, will you just raise your hand? So. Cool. Who else would like to share? Thought I saw another hand over here. Anyone else?
My name is Stephen Song, and one of my commitments is I found it easier sometimes to be an ally in an interaction where I use my privilege to help someone in a target group. And I find it actually much harder to use my privilege with people who are experiencing my same privilege. And I think that from what you all have talked about, it seems like a good commitment to be able to actually use that when helping to create more of a base for allyship.
Any last stickies that we didn't pick up? Oh, one there. In there. Okay. Anybody else want to share? Okay. All right. Thank you all for sharing. I know it's brave, and appreciate you all. That's it. That's all we have here. Tech Inclusion is the hashtag. If you want to continue to share what you're doing around allyship and continue the conversations, don't let this go. I think I do another. Yeah. Thank you to our sponsor. Thank you, Zillow. And don't stop here. Commit to that action. Commit to creating change. You spent 2+ hours here tonight. Don't let that go to waste. A lot of people gave a lot of important information, so don't let that go. Use it. Create change. And thank you again to Zillow Group for this amazing space and the partnership. Appreciate you. Right. Thank you.